Okay, I hope that we're live. Hello? Let's see. Until somebody reacts, I'm just gonna assume that I clicked on the right thing. Well, hello, friends, everybody. Welcome to yet another episode of Serenity OS Office Hours. And oh yeah, now the reactions are coming in here. Excellent. Yeah, so wait, did I make this window a bit? Oh. Um, I feel like I'm getting a little bit better at this streaming thing. Uh, wow, so many people. Hello, everybody. Very nice that you're all here. I hope everybody had a nice week, and um, I certainly did, although it was quite a weird week. If you didn't catch it, the um, Ars Technica publication had a feature article about Serenity this week, and it was really nice. So it brought in a lot of people who were not familiar with the system. So this is the article if you want to check it out if you haven't already. And yeah, so um, a whole bunch of messages and new people, but like the vast majority of that has been very positive, so that's really nice. Maybe we even have some new people in the chat today. Um, and also, I hope my sound is good, by the way. I'm still kind of figuring out how to use the improved microphone setup. Okay, I'm just kind of letting people come in here. Let's see. Yep. Everything looks good. Okay, so let's see. So what do we normally do on these streams? Well, as you know, we take questions about Serenity OS, and then we investigate whatever you bring up. So if anybody has technical questions about Serenity, or non-technical questions about Serenity, we can talk about that. And I have to admit that I've been a little bit distracted in the last few days with the article coming out and then it getting shared all over the internet. So I've done a little bit less programming than I like, but it's been a lot of fun to talk to people too. So something I just fixed before going on the stream was that Google.com used to not have a dark background up here, but just before starting the stream, I made a hack fix for it because it broke with the new CSS parser. Anyway, so let's see. So Krishna says, can you improve the desktop experience for Serenity into macOS? Because all the core features is like macOS. I don't know what that means. That does not sound like anything actionable. But maybe you can express that in a more detailed or actionable way. Let's see. And congratulations to Firat for having their paper accepted for IFL 21. I do not know what IFL 21 is. I have to look that up. Implementation and application of functional languages. I assume that's it. Well, congratulations regardless. Okay, so Manaz is asking, what scheduling algorithm does Serenity use for multitasking? We are using a round-robin algorithm with priority queues. So if you go and look at scheduler.cpp in the kernel, then you can find basically the entire scheduler is in here. So there is a set of thread-ready queues, and they are divided into buckets, and then there's like a bucket per priority, more or less. And then we essentially just round robin the runnable threads at the highest priority, and then if that queue is empty, then we round robin the threads in the next queue and so on. So it's pretty pretty basic, and it does some tricks, but nothing particularly exciting. And one of the big issues we're having with the scheduler right now is that we are trying to improve the stability of multi-core performance, so you can run the system in SMP. And the scheduler is very aggressive with locking. So there's like a big scheduler lock that you just have to take whenever you want to interact with the scheduler. And this means that the system in a multi-core configuration is very often just busy. Somebody's holding the scheduler lock, so all the other threads are screwed. But there's some ongoing work on breaking that up into smaller locks, so that's going to be pretty good. Let's see. Good afternoon, Martin. Martin is the lead developer of Ubuntu Mate, which I'm using here. It's very nice to see you here. So Not Now says, how difficult was it to start developing the kernel? Gerbert. Yeah, Gerbert was the was the original name of the kernel. It was named after a flower I had, which I had named Gerbert. I mean, developing it to the point of being able to run an ELF file in a terminal. It was not particularly difficult. I had the ELF loader written before making the kernel, so one of the very first parts of Serenity that I wrote was an ELF loader, and I was on Linux at the time, just doodling around with random little projects, and I thought, hey, it would be interesting to learn how ELF works by making a program that can take a .o file and then sort of JIT link it and just run it from the command line. So I built that so I could compile a C++ program into a .o and then run that from the command line. And that became the ELF loader of the Serenity kernel. And I think it took maybe, I don't know, a few weeks before I had the kernel running a user space ELF. But of course, it took much longer to stabilize and make it work well. But just to get it to like run a system call was very easy. The ELF format is extremely simple, and it's easy to understand once you get the hang of it. I had originally misunderstood the format quite aggressively because I didn't realize that program headers were a thing, so I thought I was supposed to figure everything out from the sections. And that's because I started on the path that I mentioned, that I started by making a JIT linker for .o files, which don't necessarily have program headers, right? So I just carried that misinformation forward into the original implementation of the ELF linker in the kernel. But then I discovered that program headers exist, and it's so much easier to load programs if you use the program headers. Let's see, Victor is saying, it's kind of amusing how even more specific questions are becoming FAQ. Yeah, that's funny, actually. But I think, I think like as long as questions are technical, it's good to talk about them because you can always find new ways to answer a question in an interesting way as long as it's deeply technical. Let's see, Mohammed's asking, what is auto variable? So auto in C++, I guess is what you're asking about. Auto means to infer the type at compile time. So basically, when you say auto something equals some expression, you're telling the compiler, figure out what this expression here returns, and then make that the type of this. So it is a way that to avoid having to specify a type yourself, but it's still strongly typed. It's just that the type is inferred by the compiler rather than you having to specify it. Let's see, Tony says, love your project. Which was the most complex or difficult component from Serenity? Oh, the most complex component. The most complex component is probably the browser. And it continues to increase in complexity and difficulty. But at the same time, it's also highly specified. So it's interesting how complexity becomes so much easier to deal with when there are specifications in the mix. Because if you are sort of building freestyle with no specification telling you what to do, then complexity can become very overwhelming. But in the case of a browser, you have like an extremely good JavaScript specification and pretty good CSS specifications. So we're able to take on this very complex thing without too much worry, thanks to all the specs. So that's really nice. It's almost like the workload of it, like the sheer amount of work that needs to be done is the real difficulty. But yeah, I would say the browser probably. So Samu is asking, hey, how does the kernel interface with hardware devices like a USB keyboard? At the moment, we don't support USB keyboards. There is support in the works for USB. Jesse and Luke have been working hard on USB stuff, but we have yet to support human interface devices. So the keyboard support that we do have is a PS2 keyboard device, which implements sort of the classic IBM PC interface to keyboards. And all emulators like QEMU, VMware, VirtualBox, whatever, they all support this type of keyboard. And most computers still actually support it as well through emulation. So even if you plug in a USB keyboard into a computer, the BIOS or equivalent will very often expose it to software as a PS2 keyboard if it tries to access it as one. And presumably that's to support like running legacy operating systems like Microsoft Windows and stuff like that. So let's see, Dither8 says, a little bird told me that a port of Qt 6 is being worked on. That is accurate. So let's go and check that out. So there's somewhere here in the queue. Somewhere in the queue, there's a Qt 6. Okay, yeah, so here, Martin Briza. Oh, I don't know how to pronounce that. The Czech letters here. But Martin, anyway, has been doing a port of Qt 6 to Serenity. And as you can see, lots of check marks missing, so it's still in the works, but it is very, very cool. And I haven't tested it myself, but Linus tweeted a screenshot of it the other day. So let's fetch that. Here's what it looks like, apparently. Now, how cool is this, right? That is the Qt text editor demo, just running casually on Serenity, even using our homegrown Serenity Sans font. So that's pretty good. But you know, it still needs work, and still needs menu integration and stuff like that. But very, very interesting work. So let's see. Nick Farley says, not being a C++ guy, can you show how the string literal svcast works or is defined? Sure. So if you look in stringview, stringview.h in our ACK library, then at the bottom of the file, you'll find operator operator quote quote sv, which is the custom literal implementation that we have. So it's a user-defined literal. So C++ allows you to add your own literal suffixes that you can then use to create like custom literals. And I think SV is special because STL also uses SV. So we kind of override it here. Yeah, it thinks that it's a reserved literal suffix, but we just do it anyway because, you know, we make our own rules. Okay, so James Pulio says, oh no, why does your Earl Grey tea link redirect to a 404? Shit, I need to fix that. Yeah, my Earl Grey tea sponsorship on this channel is pretty funny. So if you're not familiar, I'm actually an affiliate of the Twinings tea shop because I drink Earl Grey tea every video and every day. And it had the affiliate sponsorship thing has been very unsuccessful. And not a single person has purchased the tea, but I don't even care because it's something that I use, so I feel good about endorsing it regardless. Let's see. Alejandro says, did you ever try to port something to Serenity that led to a significant modification in the operating system base code? Yeah, absolutely. A bunch of things that we ported required changes. And I think in the early days, it was just like you would try to port anything and it forced you to add missing libc APIs. So like some of the first ports, we were missing like basic stdio.h functionality. I think some of the biggest trouble I had when porting GCC originally and the GNU binutils was it was what the heck was it? It was the stdio streams, so file streams in the C library, and the way that they behave when you sort of you let them buffer a bit and then you seek somewhere and the buffer has to be cleared, and then they use ungetC a lot, this API where you put some character back into the reading stream. So fungetC, I think, or what's it called? UngetC. Yeah. So they use this in the GNU programs, and getting this thing to work exactly correctly together with buffering and seeking in streams was something that took a bunch of work originally and very, very frustrating to track down. Let's see. So Manas says, does Serenity boot up in UEFI machine? Do you plan for Serenity kernel to be runnable on mobile device in the future? We currently do not have any UEFI specific stuff. So if somebody wants to work on that, they're more than welcome. And when it comes to plans, I don't have any specific plans for anything. Everything is up in the air and people can work on whatever they want to work on. And that's sort of how things get done. I know that it can be confusing for a lot of people that they don't know what's going to happen, but that makes it so much more fun because whatever happens, happens. And every month, at the end of the month, when I make these update videos, it's always almost like a surprise what's going to be in there. Okay, so Ayman says, are you building your own V8 engine for your browser? Well, we're not building V8, we're building a JavaScript engine. V8 is one JavaScript engine made by Google and friends. We are building our own JavaScript engine called libjs. It even has its own homepage, libjs.dev. And it is an independent implementation of the JavaScript language, started by me and then worked on by a lot of people, like Linus and all those happy hackers. And this page here tracks our test 262 compliance score, which we have been hard at work on ever since somebody made a graph for it, because graphs are magical. You know, you have a test and then you make a graph of your progress, then progress just magically starts improving. It's crazy. And I think now we are at something like 63% pass rates in the compliance testing, which means that we are about 1% away from the Chakra core engine, which is the old JavaScript engine that Microsoft was using for IE before they switched to using Chromium. So in terms of correctness, we're basically almost caught up to where Microsoft was before they abandoned their own engine. Of course, we're nowhere near them in performance, but still, it is an interesting milestone coming up here. So Martin says, is anyone working on enablement for a specific readily available integrated motherboard or IPC? The idea being a reference hardware device. So we don't really do anything like that, I think. I guess the closest thing to reference hardware is the emulated hardware in QEMU, and to some extent VMware and VirtualBox. We have had people working on like, oh, I want to get Serenity booting on my random laptop or my random desktop machine I have here. But there isn't any, as far as I know, there isn't any specific work on like, oh, let's all decide on a reference hardware. And so far that's been working fine, I think. But I'm maybe one of the persons less interested in bare metal stuff. I like to work on the system more holistically, not just focus on bare metal support. I think in general, I'm very happy that there are people who like to work on that, because it means that I can focus on other stuff. And my philosophy is always that people should work on the thing that they are passionate about, because that's how we make the system awesome, is that it's made by people who were doing the thing they were interested in, rather than people who sort of identify, oh, this thing is missing, I need to do that. Instead, it's, oh, dude, I really want to do this thing, I just have to do that. And if you get everybody working with that energy, then it's pretty cool. So let's see. Daniel says he recently discovered that his brand new Ryzen 5K series motherboard does not support dual channel PS2 emulation, which makes him sad. I don't even know what dual channel PS2 emulation is. Is that like that you have a mouse and a keyboard at the same time on PS2? That sounds sad though. But I mean, I guess it's a reality that like new hardware is going to have smaller and smaller tolerance and support for 1980s programming paradigms, so and hardware emulation. So I guess we do have to get used to that and sort of implement support for new stuff, but I don't think that should be particularly impossible either. We'll see. Blod says, have you written some assembly in the Serenity's code? Sure, there's a whole bunch of assembly. If you search for ASM in the codebase, you can find a bunch of inline assembly. But most of the assembly is very, very short things, like calling some privileged instruction, for example, read model specific register or write model specific register. Stuff that does not have like a C++ way of expressing. So you want to tell the CPU something that the C++ doesn't have a way to express this. So you're forced to use assembly. We have a bunch of that. Much of it is like dealing with page tables and stuff like that. And there's a small amount of like memcopy and memset optimized versions. But they're not terribly exciting. The system is fairly low on assembly, all things considered, because you don't really need that much assembly to build a kernel. I think it's a common misconception that you need to write a bunch of assembly. Really, the trickiest assembly in the kernel is probably entering the kernel from the bootloader and also from interrupts and both software and hardware interrupts, and also task switching. And outside of that, it's like trivial. And then people are saying that they did purchase Earl Grey tea, just not for my affiliate link. Well, I'm just I'm happy if you enjoy the tea. I definitely don't mind that you don't use the affiliate link. It's almost like it's more of a meme affiliate link, because I feel very strongly that I don't want to promote anything that I don't use, and that really limits my ability to accept sponsorships. And I had a couple of offers a while ago, actually. Like companies approaching me to sponsor the channel. And then when I said that I just need to test this product before I can endorse it, then they were not interested anymore. So it's tricky. So let's see. Nicola says, what's your favorite part of operating system to work on? Oh, I don't know. My favorite part of Serenity is probably the GUI toolkit. I really enjoy putting together a very, very pleasant to use GUI development toolkit because I guess because it's something that I was always afraid of in the past. Like I would always run away from GUI development. I didn't want to do it. But since I started building Serenity, I was forced to learn how to write GUIs, and I don't know, I bonded with it, I guess, and it became my favorite thing to work on. Let's see. Let's see. Martin has some old laptops he might give it a whirl on. Yeah, go for it. In general, I think machines from like between 2000 and 2007 and 2008 is what I've seen people very successful with just getting it running. Newer computers might have some more trouble, and older computers might lack some of the CPU stuff we assume we have. Let's see. So Tetsui says, could you explain how dynamic loader determines the base load address? Asking this because I tried to implement getAuxVol ATP header, but gave up because it's too hard for me. Okay. How the dynamic loader determines the base load address. Do you mean the base load address of the dynamic loader itself? I believe that's passed in through an auxiliary variable, but I don't recall, so let's go and find out. Dynamic loader. There's an elf auxiliary for the base address. I'm pretty sure it's AT base. Yeah, AT base. So, and in the kernel we call that base address apparently for some reason. Yeah, so when the kernel, when you're doing an exec in the kernel, we have to generate the auxiliary vector. And for people who are not familiar with the auxiliary vector, it's a fascinating thing actually. So when you run a C program or C++ program, you are used to your main function looking like this, right? So you have int RHC and char RHV. When the kernel starts the program, it's actually calling another function called start, which gets some additional parameters. I think it's like that, if I recall correctly. This is the environment. So the kernel also passes the environment. And then this guy goes ahead and calls, he does a bunch of setup stuff, and then returns whatever main returns. And there's a sneaky thing about the environment array, which is that after the last entry in the environment array, there's a secret second array called the elf auxiliary values, which is like an array of things that the kernel can pass to newly launched programs. And that includes random info, like what is your user ID? What is your group ID? What kind of CPU are you running on? How many times does the hardware timer tick per second? And it even passes 16 random bytes that you can use for whatever you want, and a bunch of other stuff. So that follows this one. So it's not like this, but rather it's sort of past the last entry of this thing. It's a bit of an awkward thing. If we look at how that's implemented, So there's an API called getAuxVal, get auxiliary value. And as you can see here, it gets the current environment and then just iterates to the end of it and then goes one step further. And that's where you find the auxiliary values. So let's see, Tetsuya says, I meant the base load address of the loaded program. The loaded program, not the dynamic loader. So that should be randomized by the loader, I think. Let's see, dynamic. I forget what this thing is called. Is it dynamic loader map? I think I haven't looked at this in so long. I think it's dynamic loader map. We'll create a dynamic object. And load program headers. Yeah, this guy right here. So when we load the text segment and all the other program headers, we will do an mmap here. So where you want to look is in dynamic loader load program headers. And this is part of how we implement ASLR, or address space layout randomization, is that when we map the executable here, we pass map randomized to mmap, which is how it ends up in a random place. So let's see, let me catch up here. Let's see, Matthew says, hi Andreas, I just recently finished my CS degree. For my final year project, I wrote an operating system. I got great marks, and I just wanted to thank you because your work was a big inspiration to me. That's so cool. Congratulations on finishing your degree and on getting great marks. I'm really happy to hear that that you were inspired to do well. That's so cool. Daniel says the dual channel PS2 is for having both mouse and keyboard. Okay, yeah, so that's irritating if they don't support that, because most people probably want to have both mouse and keyboard. So it seems like basically like a bug in their implementation. And then people are pointing out that the affiliate link for my T is 404ing. Yes, it is 404ing apparently. I'm not going to try to fix that on stream. Actually, I did get an email from the T people just yesterday, and they were saying that they're having a sale, a 20% off sale, and that I should inform my loyal followers. I didn't actually check that out. T sale. Let's go find out if that's actually a thing. Twining sale. So I think they might be having a sale on T on the Twinings store. So you don't need my affiliate code for that. You can just go and check it out if you want to pick up some discount tea. This is high quality tea, by the way. Let's see. Tbix says, is there a Chromium port for Serenity? No, there is no Chromium port. We are building our own browser because that's just a lot more fun, a lot more interesting. And people sometimes ask like, oh, why don't you just port existing software so that you don't have to write it? But that kind of misses the point of what we're doing. We're just having fun and trying to learn by doing stuff. So that's why we are building our own stuff. Neil says, can you tell us about the first program you ever wrote that made you feel really proud of what you had made? Oh, that must have been a really long time ago. I think maybe some of the first stuff I was really proud of was when, I don't remember how old I was, maybe 7 years old or something like that. And I had math homework in first grade, and I made a basic program to quiz myself on basic math problems. And I remember feeling pretty proud of that, like I had an edge on my classmates. Let's see. I still don't know how to pronounce this name. I have to gotta look it up. Damn it, how do you... Let's go to Google Translate. I don't know Cyrillic alphabet. Igor. Okay, Igor says, when you start building operating system from scratch after the booting process, what is the next big thing you need to build? Process manager, drivers, or something else? So after you boot, you really need a way to communicate messages to yourself, right? So that's what I would recommend doing first. Some way to communicate like strings. And you can do that with a serial port, or you can put something on the screen. Or if you're using an emulator, you can use an emulator debug port, like the E9 port, for example, which QEMU and Box both support. And then after that, it's really up to you. Like you can do whatever you think is interesting. I think there isn't like a set path that you have to follow. And as I like to tell people, you don't have to start with a bootloader either. That's kind of I don't know, it's kind of this idea that so many people have that the way you write a new operating system is that you write a bootloader and then you do other stuff and then there's this order to it, but I don't agree with that. Like I think you can do whatever is interesting to you, and you can stage those components in another environment. So if you want to build you know, a GUI library, you can build that in Linux and then bring it to your thing. And you can build drivers by communicating with hardware on another operating system if you prefer. Like you don't have to start with bootloader and then bringing yourself into a bare metal environment, but you can. You can. But really, it's very open-ended. Like there isn't anything that you need to do. Like you need to do everything. So order it whatever way you like. David says, I believe that you have access to the env in main as well. Well, maybe you do. I guess we can look up how we call main. Wait, where's our CRT0? No, not that one. Where do we call main? Yes, we pass the environment to main as well. Yeah, so you're right. I think we pass it to main, and then most main functions just ignore it because they don't even include it in the prototype. But it is on the stack, so if you want to pick it up in main, I guess you can just do that. So say that you are writing a main function, you could technically do this and get the environment here. But if you're using a standard C library, then it will be available in the environment as well. So you don't have to do it that way. You can do what you like. Cured Meat says, yo, when did this guy turn into Viking? I was born Viking. Let's see, Martin says, first time running Serenity. As a fan of the traditional desktop paradigm, I have to say I love what you and the team have created. Yeah, I'm obviously, I'm also a big fan of the traditional desktop paradigm. And that's why I like to use Ubuntu Mate on my host machine as well. It's nice and simple. And I do think that the traditional desktop paradigm has a lot of room for improvement and refinement, but I don't agree with the people who think that you have to throw it out and start over. I guess it seems to me that this idea that like, oh, we have to adapt to touch input is really what confused everybody. Because if you let go of that idea, then the traditional desktop paradigm is still very sensible. I would say the most sensible. Anyway, let's see. Mehdi says, how a program communicates with GUI in Serenity. So the way that you build GUIs is that you use the libGUI library. And I guess we can make a small test program just for the fun of it. Userland utilities. So we'll call it Mehdi. And let me go ahead and make sure that we link that. So you have to link with libGUI. That's the thing. And once you have that, it's just a matter of including the basic primitives from libGUI, like GUI application, GUI window. And just for funsies, let's make a checkbox. Okay, so, and hey, why don't we pick up the environment while we're here? So then normally what we do is we create the application object first, because you have to have an application object. The application object is who is responsible for communicating with the Windows server. And the Windows server is the thing that puts everything on screen, right? So it takes the argument array info as its inputs so that it can handle some special stuff. And then in order to enter the event loop, if we just do this. So if you have done any kind of Qt programming, this should look pretty familiar to you. The concept is basically the same, just that we have a bit more modern use of C++, whereas Qt has a lot of things in their object model where like ownership is implicit in some ways that you have to get used to. We're a bit more explicit. Hello, M. Costa. You have arrived just in time for the Serenity Hello World checkbox tutorial. We're going to make a checkbox tutorial today for some reason, just to switch up the flavor. So you make an application, and then you need a window. We'll call it Win for short today, for some reason. So you just make a window, and then you can show that window on screen. So already, this is basically what you need. I have to say that I'm not going to use this actually because I don't need the environment. But we're still gonna have it there. So this should be enough just to get a window up on screen. And essentially, you don't need to talk directly to the Windows server yourself. Everything is neatly handled by the libgui library. And yeah, so this is what it looks like. You just get this window, and when you exit, the program exits. And then if we wanted to put a checkbox in here, we would just make it we can make one the main widget. Set main widget of the window. Do that, and maybe we should give it a text. Check this out. So the way that the GUI library works is, oh shoot, there we go. The way the GUI library works is kind of based on Qt and also inspired by GTK and some other libraries that I've worked on. And the reason that it's glitching here now, if I resize and the background is black, it's because we need to tell it to fill with background color. So checkbox set fill with background color true. Normally you don't have a checkbox as your main widget, so it's not used to being filled. So there we go. That's the basic outline. So let's see. Martin says, what app or feature would you like most to see added to Serenity that's not currently being worked on? Well, I guess if I'm being totally selfish, the stuff that I personally need most for using Serenity as a daily driver are more video and audio recording and editing capabilities, because I make videos and I stream and I record stuff. And we currently have very little capabilities in those areas. And it's something that I'm kind of, I don't know, I know that I'm going to have to deal with them eventually, but it's somehow, I didn't even start looking into how to do those things yet. But I know that I'll eventually have to deal with it. So, it is exciting when people pick those things up, but somehow it seems like nobody so far has felt like truly strongly about improving those things. Like we still have very stuttery audio, for example. and stuff like that, like things that need some love. But I'm confident that somebody will eventually fall in love with these things and work on them, and it very well may be me. Let's see, PMH Pereira says, just signed the contract for a new job. Most used 3D graphics engine for the TV broadcast industry and integration with Unreal Engine. And PMH is pumped. That's awesome. Congratulations, Mr. or Miss Pereira. That is certainly cause for pumpage. Dither8 says, ever considered hosting a forum so that progress can be publicly searchable? I'm not a huge fan of the forum format. I've been a member of many forums throughout the years, and it's never seemed practical to me. Like there's so much friction in that type of communication environment. I know a lot of people love it. I just don't really myself. But our Discord server is publicly joinable and it is searchable. So if anybody wants to search through it, you can just join and search. And of course, our bug tracker and everything on GitHub is publicly searchable as well. So Dinushka says, hello from Sri Lanka. Have you tried any type of Ceylon tea? I have. And it's okay, but it's not my favorite. That's an unexpected question. Hector says, have you tried Arch Linux? Yes, I have tried Arch Linux. It was not for me. Let's see. Instance says, when are you planning to make the first release? I don't have a plan. Nobody here has a plan, and we all just have to get used to it. Ruven says, SerenityOS heart with a super chat, by the way. So thank you very much, Ruven. That's so nice. Thank you. Looking forward to seeing it run on bare metal and being a daily driver for some of us. Yes, I'm definitely excited about that too. I think my main concern is that I want it to be a very high quality experience for myself, and I am willing to like spend a lot of time getting it ready so that when I do make the transition, that it's going to be excellent. And I know that other people are more eager to just get it up and running as a daily driver right away. So you'll probably see other people adopting it as a daily driver before me, but I don't think we're quite there yet anyways, but it'll be interesting. So Ditherate says he's giving a tip to Martin here to hold the control key when selecting the themes. Right, so that's actually a little thing in Serenity that I really love, that I just added randomly because when I thought of it, and then now I miss it everywhere else. So what he's talking about is if you hold down the control key when you click on menu items, then the menu doesn't go away. And this is just so nice. I really, really like it. And it was just a random idea I had. And I think that there are similar features on some old like RISC OS or something like that. I don't recall, somebody told me. And it works in any menu in the system. So just hold control and it does not dismiss the menu when you activate an item. Very, very cool. So you can use that and quickly change things around. Okay. Let's see. Aria says, I'm trying to implement the cat dog using HTML and JS. Right, the cat dog. So you should be able to do that in, like, even our browser should be able to run a cat dog in HTML and JS if you play your cards right and don't use too many crazy APIs. That would be a fun thing to see. For now, here's native code cat dog running on the desktop. So let's see. James says, I've heard previously of interest in building libgui apps for host Linux systems. What's the hurdles with this? Make the painter have a SDL, GL, or XORed backend? Right. So the big issue with running our GUI applications on Linux or any other system is that our GUI library is tightly coupled with our Windows server. So all of our GUI stuff expects to communicate with Windows Server. So you would have to either write a different backend for libgui so that instead of making Windows Server calls, it would talk to X11 or maybe Qt or GTK or something like that. So you need some kind of translation layer. Or you can also port Windows Server. So that's something that's been done in the past. Joshua Stein from the OpenBSD project ported our Windows Server and ported everything in the Serenity userland basically to OpenBSD over a year ago now, and had the browser and everything running on OpenBSD, which I think that's less work, but the result, of course, it's more restrictive because you cannot, then you were not able to coexist with like X11 applications. So you couldn't have like Firefox and Serenity at the same time. You could only give Windows Server the entire frame buffer. So a translation layer, if you wanted to build that, like some kind of translation layer backend for libgui, I think would be the most sophisticated approach. Alan Pope says that his nostalgia feels are tickled. Right. Yeah, it's always good when people feel good from what we're doing. I think personally, like I've run out of nostalgia feelings a long time ago, and this has become something else for me. Like because I got all the mileage I could out of the nostalgia feelings in the first year or so, and now I'm more driven by the desire to create something something excellent and something beautiful. Just going back to something that worked really well and then trying to iterate on it and make it even better. Actually quite similar to what Ubuntu Mate is doing, to be fair. Let's see. So MCosta with the super chat for no reason. Thank you for that. That's excellent. Alan Pope with the super chat saying, you're doing amazing work here. Quite the inspiration. Thank you, Alan. And thank you for the super chat. That's very nice. And also Martin Wimpress saying, resisting the urge to find something to work on. Great project. My friend, you will not be able to resist that urge for very long if you stick around. It is... it has many people have fallen into the trap, and I think everybody had fun. I don't know of a single person who ended up not having fun. So good luck though. Let's see. Literally says, in which part during the development of Serenity you've started to build the GUI? Okay, so actually I built the GUI even before Serenity existed. It was one of the original components. So if you go to serenityos.org, you can find these little happy birthday posts that I made. So this is the one that I made when Serenity was 1 year old. And it has some screenshots, if you will, of very early stuff. So I started by building a couple of different things, and a GUI was one of them. And as I mentioned earlier, an ELF loader. So this is the first ever screenshot of what is today Windows Server and libgui. It was a Linux program that just drew text and rectangles. This is my phone photograph. You can see KDE3 running in the background here. And here is me working on the GUI, still on Linux here, but the kernel was in development, but I was still like on Linux working on a GUI. And it wasn't until here. So like over 3 months into the project, actually, where I migrated the GUI from Linux to Serenity. So I had already built up. I mean, it's like it doesn't look very good, obviously, but you can kind of figure out what everything is. And I think it looked basically like this when I migrated it to Serenity. And the original architecture of the GUI in Serenity was pretty funny. It was a kernel side thing where you would make kernel system calls to create windows, because I don't know what I was trying to do. I was just trying to do something. As I said, like I learned a lot about how to put together a GUI toolkit and a sensible GUI implementation while building this. And building a GUI in your kernel is definitely not the right track to go on for this system, at least. Let's see. So Matas says, okay, anyway, do you have smart pointers video? I do not have a smart pointers video. I do, however, have a smart pointers document. So if you go to the SerenityOS repository and you click on documentation, then there is a document called smartpointers.md, and it describes the 3 main smart pointers or smart pointer families that we have in the system. And it has examples and explanations for how they work. So I think you might find that useful. I do not have a video talking about that. But everything you need to know to use them productively is covered by this document. Let's see. Instance says, I've thought that tribute to Terry Davis, which you did 2 years ago, will be a tradition. 9 days from date. No, that was just a one-off thing. But it is interesting. Like, so he's talking about this video I made in 2019. What is it called? Terry Davis, SerenityOS. This one right here, right? So it is still one of the most popular videos on my channel, with almost 40,000 views, because people are really interested in TempleOS and Terry Davis. But I don't want to sort of milk that for attention or whatever. I don't know. I feel a bit weird about it. It's good. I just want to leave that alone. Like, I made my tribute, and I think that's a decent contribution to the thing. Let's see. So Govinda says, where is the TCP IP implementation of Serenity? And to implement network stuff, do you read entire RFCs or specs? Or do you use some available implementation as a reference point? So the TCP implementation and the IP implementation, they are both in the kernel net directory. So let me bring that up. So here in kernel, you have net, and in net you will find IPv4 sockets, which is the base class of all the IPv4 socket implementations, which are TCP and UDP currently, and they are down here. And most of the code in the sockets is dealing with sending out data, and when data comes in from the wire, then it ends up in a kernel task called a network task, and the network task sort of parses incoming packets, and then if they look like they are intended for one of the live sockets we currently have, then it will go and find that socket by its port and address tuple, and then basically part of the TCP protocol is implemented in the network task. So it's come up before, and it's something that where the factoring, I'm not entirely happy with the factoring. I wish that the TCP protocol would be contained somehow in the socket. So I think that's probably possible. Like we would just need to like proxy more of the information that comes in on the wire and just forward that to the TCP implementation and then handle stuff there. Because, I mean, you can't get rid of the network task entirely because somebody has to parse incoming packets, right? But the moment you see that, oh, this is a TCP packet, we could forward it to the TCP implementation. Let's see. Martin says, the pace of development is astonishing. Yeah, it really has been. I think many people tend to be surprised when they join the project and discover how fast you can do stuff and how fast they can do stuff if they are in an environment that is conducive to fast work. Many of us are used to working in environments that sort of slow you down a lot, and we try not to do that too much in Serenity. So it's a very positive experience for many people, and it's been really nice to be able to share that. Blot says, have you heard of Matrix Protocol? You have a Discord server? Yes, I have heard of Matrix Protocol, but I do not care about it. Paul says, hi, Andreas. Why did you decide not to use C++ STL for SerenityOS? Because I don't really like it, and it has so much functionality that I don't need. And instead, we build our own much smaller, much tighter library that does everything that we need. And it also allows us to be much more expressive. STL carries decades of legacy constraints and legacy things. And since we control everything ourselves, we control the whole stack, we don't need to tie ourselves to all of that. Like it's a heavy stone to tie yourself to for no reason. So we just don't, basically. So Mehdi says, what are you currently working on the system? So as I mentioned when I started the streams, I've been working on some random web compatibility stuff today, just digging into why does the web look so crappy again? Because it used to look a bit better. So the first thing I mentioned was that I was fixing up these the header here on google.com to be dark again. It was light because we broke the opacity property. And obviously Google doesn't look quite right still, so there's a bunch of other stuff that needs to be fixed here. And also there's a little piece of text here that doesn't show. Also, I can't click on these anymore. So that used to work, so I need to dig into what that is. I haven't worked on the browser stack for quite some time in Serenity, and I thought it would be fun to catch up on it. James Pulio says, what is your favorite syscall? Serenity unique syscall. Oh, I don't know. Let's go look at the list. Syscall.h. My favorite syscall. I guess maybe disown is one that I like. It's a Serenity custom thing where you can call disown with the process ID, and it basically allows you to tell the kernel, I don't care about this process. And it's really useful after you spawn a process and you don't want any ties to it. Because otherwise, if you spawn a process, like normally you're expected to wait on it or something like that, or deal with it in some way after launching it. But if you truly don't care about a process that you have spawned, Serenity allows you to simply disown it with a simple syscall, and then it's none of your concern anymore. The kernel will take care of it for you. That's always something that I thought was a bit messy on Unix. See, trap exit Yeah, so Checkbox, it maintains the TempleOS website. Hello, Checkbox. Nice to see you here. Let's see, Mustafa says, what's an area in computer science that you're not really familiar with, but would look to get good at? An area in computer science that I'm not really familiar with, but would look to get good at. I guess I sometimes feel that sound is one of my weaknesses. Like I haven't done much sound programming at all, and I would like to get better at it at some point. But that also requires working on it, and maybe I have this imagination that eventually, when everything else is good enough, then I will start working on some media production stuff for Serenity. But at the same time, I don't know if I'm really looking to get good at it because I don't have that urge to do it. So maybe a better answer is maybe compilers, because I never did like learn how to write compilers. I worked on the JavaScript engine in Serenity, but that's kind of my limited experience with that. So Derolus says, why do you think so many engineers complain about the state of tooling? Compilers, debuggers, profilers, text editors, etc., saying that they haven't kept up with the times. I don't know. I don't hear I don't hear a lot of truly productive people complaining. In my experience, truly productive people tend to learn how to use tools effectively, and then they don't have that much to complain about. I mean, obviously there are exceptions to that, and there are people who are just chronically whiny or chronically negative. But in general, I think the tools are fine. People maybe expect more, but if you want something better, sometimes you have to do it yourself. And that's certainly the approach we take in Serenity. Like, there's nobody gets to complain in Serenity, right? Because the responsibility is totally contained within the project. If you don't like something, then fix it. I think that's a much better, much healthier environment to be in general for a developer. Because if you find yourself like complaining about something that you don't have control over, or you can't fix, that's it's kind of poisonous, really, for the spirit. Let's see. Virai says, I'm confused by the distinction between the C++ language and the standard library. I think the C++ committee shares that confusion. Since SerenityOS has the ACT libraries, does that mean language standards like C++ 11, 17, 20 are irrelevant? No, it does not mean that. The C++ language standards are still very much relevant because we use all of the language level features of C++, but we do not use the standard library features. And it always seems weird to me that the C++ working group puts so much time and effort into the standard library, which not everybody wants to use it anyway. It would be cool if they would focus on improving the language, but not everybody agrees with this, obviously. They don't, for example. But we use C++ 20 very much. We just don't use the library that comes with it. Let's see. Literally says, can you explain a little bit about the memory management mechanism in Serenity? I mean, sure. What do you want to know about? There is a lot to say about it, but it is very similar to most Unix systems. So like similar to Linux and BSD, and similar to Darwin as well. We have the basic POSIX API, so mmap, munmap. Oh, this is not the right file. Mmap, munmap, mprotect, madvise, like all the basic stuff. And in the kernel, you have a memory address space per process that is shared by all of the threads within that process. And if you have more specific questions about how something works, we can talk about that, but it's a little bit too broad. Let's see, Philip says, all you need is printf. Well, you're not wrong. Let's see, Dither8 says, if you integrated the GNU core utils and glibc, would RMS force you to call it GNU/Serenity? I think it's pretty clear at this point that RMS has not managed to force anyone to call it GNU/Serenity. And it seems to me that that's more of a joke than anything else, but I don't have any interest in using GNU core utils or glibc. So he'll have to find another handle on me, I guess. We do build with GCC, so I think that was actually started by Richard himself, right? So if he wants to get on our case about calling it GNU/Serenity, then I guess he can fire up his text email client and message us about it. Let's see. Amal says, how do you find the motivation to keep working / be productive day to day when you are working for yourself without a boss / structure, etc.? Well, that's pretty easy. I just really, really want to work on Serenity. So motivation just kind of comes out of me, whatever I do. I haven't had any trouble finding the motivation so far because this is what I want to do. And I feel incredibly fortunate to have somehow ended up in this position where I get to do exactly the thing that I want to do. And I have so many people cheering for me and saying like, yeah, go do it. It's a very, very strange outcome and not where I thought I would end up in life, but I'm incredibly grateful for being here. And I'm definitely going to enjoy it for as long as I can. And I don't know, it's just, I just wake up and I just feel like working on it. I don't know. I don't really have a good tip for that. But I guess what I should say is that that I also have very strong habits for working on it. So even if I didn't particularly feel like it, I still have a strong habit of getting up and sitting down at the computer and working on it anyway. So I don't know if I would even notice that I didn't feel like it because I have the strong habit of getting up and getting to the computer, hacking on the system, reviewing code or whatever, and just by doing that, I sort of get into it. So even if I'm not in the mood when I wake up, I'll be in the mood by the time I start thinking. I don't know if that's a good answer, but I need to think a little bit more about this. I think it's very possible that I'm still kind of riding an excitement wave, and that I haven't come face with like the lack of motivation yet, and that it's something that's waiting for me. Because I mean, you definitely cannot rely on motivation forever. You're gonna have days where you don't have it, and when I worked another job in addition to working on Serenity, it was constantly an issue to find motivation to do that, and that was purely discipline driven, right? So yeah, I think I shouldn't be too confident that I'm going to just enjoy myself forever. I do have to take seriously like maintaining that discipline, not become reliant on the motivation. So let's see. Levi says, just wanted to pop in and say thanks for bringing attention to the Lang Jam 2021 starting later today. Gonna participate even though I have no idea what I'm doing. Ooh, yes, let us promote Lang Jam. So Lang Jam is a programming language jam that runs this weekend. And the idea is that you and your team spend the weekend building a new programming language. And it is hosted by our friend JT. And I think they will announce the theme. It's starting in pretty soon, actually. Time in UK. I'm bad at time zones. Yeah, okay, so it's starting in less than 3 hours. And if anybody wants to participate in the Lang Jam, then go and check that out. I'll actually, let me post a link to it here in the chat. So James says, last question. Have you yourself used Logom for some projects or seen others using it? I personally use it for all my projects now and have been finding some interesting bugs with my use. I have used it myself for some projects, yes. I even used it at my previous job for some things, and it was really nice. Made it a lot easier to get started on a pretty bare bones project that we had. And if you do find some interesting bugs, I would really appreciate it if you would fix those in our upstream implementation as well. OA says, any plans for emulation of other OSs or platforms? Something like Wine. Probably not, but that's just like my gut reaction that I feel like that would be inviting a huge amount of complexity for something that's not in my core interest, at least. But I don't know. I don't want to say like never to that one, but it also doesn't sound super interesting. Let's see. Eliter Roger, says, is it self-hosting yet? I don't know what you mean by self-hosting. That I get that question every now and then, and I don't know what that means. Avian says, how far is Serenity Project from the point where you would use it full time? I don't know. I really don't know. When it feels like the quality is good enough, and it would, I guess when it feels like it would be more convenient to use Serenity than to use Linux, then I will just switch. But we are not there right now. Let's see. Victor says he would love to participate in LangJam, but never managed to fully finish a compiler or interpreter of his own. I think you are probably the target audience for LangJam just as much as anybody else. I watched the intro video that JT did about LangJam, and to me it sounded like everybody is welcome, like any experience level. Let's see. Dun, dun. Elite Roger says, it means that you can develop on it and compile it on there. We have a port of everything that you need to do it, but I don't think anybody is using that at the moment because it's very, very cumbersome. I have built Serenity on Serenity in the past, but I haven't tried it for a long time now because it's just not as convenient as developing it this way. But I see that this comes up every now and then. It seems to be this thing that people have this meme idea that oh, you have to build the system on the system and then you've achieved something. And I don't really know what you've achieved because it's still not convenient. And I guess I have a higher standards than that. Like I want it to be a really good experience to develop Serenity on Serenity. So for me, it doesn't really mean anything that you can build it in there. Like I want the code editing and experience to be really good as well, and I want to compile really fast, and I want the Git stuff to work really well, and all kinds of things like that, right? James says, I certainly have reported my issues. One of the problems with libtls and libhttp calling cleanup and finish more than once. Oh, dude, I have seen that issue too. And did that get fixed? I have seen that, and it looked particularly bad. And most recently, the event loop was incorrectly using unnormalized time vals in the select syscall. Oh, unnormalized. Oh, was that was the thing where we had more than a whole second worth of microseconds or something like that, right? Yeah, I mean that's not good. So it's good if that got fixed. Did that get fixed? Normalize. Wow, that's a large. I don't know if that got fixed. Did that get fixed? We gotta look into that otherwise. Normalized. Wait, is this your thing? Copy time from user? 9408. Okay, all right. Interesting. So what's going on here? Our kernel does not check whether these times are normalized. Aha. So you are doctor underscore. This is something I find a bit weird about GitHub, by the way. So it stores everybody has like their full name optionally, and the nickname, but they show the nickname here. I feel like it would be nicer to show the full name because it's hard to remember what everybody's nickname is. Let's see. So the kernel does not check whether these times are normalized. Sure. Yeah, we should probably figure out a way to do that in a single location. I guess that's what Brian is getting at here. Yeah, I mean, that sounds like it doesn't sound like a trivial fix, but it's something that we should fix. Alex says, at what age did you start programming and how long have you been working with C++? I started programming very, very early, but it was basic, not C++. And I have been working with C++ professionally since 2005. And I started working on open source C++ in 2003, I think, or 2004. So quite a long time at this point. Victor says he'll join the Discord for LangJam. Great. I think that you're going to do great. Just make a simple language. You don't have to aim crazy high when you do something like your first programming language, right? Like just make something that's fun and interesting and challenging for you. So Mr. ER here, can you explain about the license Serenity uses? Am I allowed to distribute and sell it, for example? Yes, Serenity is permissively licensed with the 2-class BSD license. You can absolutely distribute and sell it if you like. If you can find somebody willing to pay you for it, then go ahead and take their money, I guess. So literally says, how do you control and maintain the project in the Git perspective? How things don't get messy with so many contributors and developers. So the way you maintain a project is by having code review and strong contribution guidelines. So the Serenity project has a contributing guidelines document right here, contributing.md in the project root, that describes exactly what is expected from people who participate in the project and contribute code. And by just getting on everybody's case about sticking to the rules, that's how you avoid having a mess. And if somebody makes a mess, then you tell them stop making a mess. That's basically it. So it's a large part of it is social enforcement, right? But we do what we can with tools. So for example, if you don't format your code correctly, then there's a bot that will tell you, please format your code correctly, right? If you don't format your commit messages correctly, there's a bot that will yell at you about that. So we do what we can with bots, but when it comes to like more abstract forms of quality, which is, harder to quantify, then it's social enforcement. Ali says, you mean your name isn't awesome? No, your name is not CX. Let's see. Khalid says, reposting as my queue was skipped. What was the most challenging part when you started coding the kernel until it started to take shape? I don't know. I remember it was a bit of a hassle getting it to multitask. Like getting it to switch between different threads. It took me like a day, I think, or something like that. It took maybe a day or two before that was working reliably. But after that, it was pretty straightforward. Let's see. Novandro says, "Hey Andreas, what do you think about the future of operating systems? Any thought about machine learning embedded into a possible future kernel?" I have no idea. I'm not really interested in machine learning. Richard Karmazin says, what is missing to be able to code SerenityOS in SerenityOS? I don't know. It depends on what you personally need for that. What I personally want to do it is a long list of things, which include the ability to make YouTube videos. But everybody has different requirements. Mustafa is asking, what does AK stand for? It stands for many things. Some people have different theories about it. The original AK was agnostic kit, which meant that it was a kit that you could use both from user space and from kernel space. Let's see. Sushi Smita? Wow, that's an unusual name. Very interesting. Says, I'm making my own operating system called Garb OS, and watching these videos gives me hope for my own operating system. Great. I am definitely happy to hear that, because one of the things I try to do with Serenity and with YouTube content is just to give people a realistic idea of what's possible and how much work goes into it. And I feel like I've been able to communicate that to people. I mean, obviously I don't show like 24-hour live cam of myself, so you don't see everything I do, but before I started, there wasn't any content about operating systems, at least nothing that I could find about like what actually goes into building all these things, right? So when I hear that people find it helpful and that it gives them hope for making progress on their own things, then I'm very happy, because that's kind of what I wanted to achieve or it's one of the many things I wanted to achieve when making YouTube videos. Alex says, if I want to become as proficient in C++ as you are, what could be a good pathway for me to take? Do you maybe have a list of projects that would teach me certain skills? So that really depends on where you are right now. If you are in your first 2 years of C++, I would recommend just building every little thing that seems interesting to you, like do tiny projects. If you are more experienced than that, I would recommend joining mature open source projects and fixing bugs in them, and and like learning from that, because at least that's how I got my C++ skills, and that I spent some time hacking on my own, but then when I felt comfortable enough to participate in larger projects, I joined the KDE project, and all of the exposure that I had in KDE to, different data structures, algorithms, programming patterns, and also like exposure to great architecture is it was extremely helpful for me. And you don't really get any of that when you work by yourself, or you get very limited amounts of it. So I think the moment you feel ready to participate in open source projects, it's much, much more efficient to learn by doing that. But I wouldn't recommend joining open source projects if you, like I said, like if you're in your first year or two of learning, because you will not be able to be productive. Let's see. Noah says, you mentioned you switch once Serenity is more convenient. Are the convenience you're looking forward to? I don't know how to interpret that question. I'm failing to parse here. Let's see. Did I miss questions? I probably did. Dun, 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 dun. Aris says, what is your opinion on cryptocurrencies? And do you accept/will accept tips in crypto? I don't have any strong feelings on that. But I do not want to accept tips in crypto if I can avoid it. If somebody wants to give me a large amount of it, I will make an exception, of course. But for small tips, it's honestly not worth dealing with the Swedish tax office because they are very, very particular about cryptocurrencies. Let's see. Philip with the super chat. Thank you, Philip. Philip says, do you have any preferences on what language Serenity components should be written in? Also, what C++ feature do you like and or dislike the most? So my preference on language is definitely C++, just because that allows them to integrate with all of the existing stuff. That's one of the main strengths of Serenity is that everything synergizes because everybody can share code with each other, right? If you look at basically every other system, even systems that are developed under one roof, like Mac OS and iOS, they are written in so many different languages because, people have different preferences, right? And that was an area where I thought that we can do even better by just doing everything in a unified way across the entire system. So any software written outside of C++ that does not integrate with C++ at all is going to have a very hard time fitting in on the system. And what C++ feature do I like and or dislike the most? Oh, there are so many to choose from. I think I wish that references would just be non-null pointers and that they wouldn't have the restriction on rebinding. I always feel like that's such an annoying thing. Like, or if you want references to be the way they are, then just give me something else to express the non-nullity of a pointer. I find it so silly. And just rules of rebinding in general, I guess. Like, I would love to be able to rebind. I would love to be able to rebind a pointer to a reference. That's the thing that comes to mind right now. There's also like a ton of random things that I don't like. And by the way, Philip started a YouTube channel since he was asking about it here. I don't remember if it was last stream or a couple of streams ago, but but he started a YouTube channel about his GCC Rust project, which I definitely recommend checking out if you're interested in that. So let me actually link that in the chat. Knuse Duge says, Mannen du är king som fan. Oh yeah. There's a little bit of Swedish here, but it's a positive sentiment. And then he says, big into games and new grounds. So what do you think the future prospect for 2D game development are for the operating system? Oh, the future prospects for 2D game development. I think, realistically speaking, you'd probably want to use something like SDL, right? If you're building 2D games, because as much as I would do things this way, I don't think that the average game developer is going to specifically target Serenity anytime soon. So it seems to me that us having a good SDL port and supporting libraries is probably the best way to get games onto Serenity. And once we're able to support like 3D via OpenGL, I know a lot of games that look 2D are still implemented in 3D, right? So I do think that GL support will also bring games to the system, but yeah, I guess that I never thought much about this, but it seems to me that like a rock solid SDL port and better audio capabilities, like at least audio mixing and playback, because that's currently the big weakness, I would say, for gaming on Serenity, is that the sound is pretty bad, just because the driver is stuttery. I guess it would be interesting to hear from somebody who actually does games, if they could tell us like what would make the platform better for them, right? So but yeah, I guess that's that. I would love to hear what people would like to see for games purposes, and then I would love to help them make it reality. So Panta says, you should do more code review videos. Sure, yeah, I should probably do that. That sounds like a good idea. So Eliter says, was building an emulator of x86 helpful for when you started then writing an operating system? Yes, this was the single most helpful thing for me. My experience with writing x86 emulators made me very well equipped for building an x86 kernel, because once you've written an x86 emulator, you know what the kernel needs to do, right? You know exactly how the kernel interacts with paging and translation, look-aside buffers and stuff like that. So very, very helpful. So Khaled says, is Serenity opinionated in certain areas where it deviates from being Unix-like? I.e. things you thought Unix didn't get quite right that you wanted to improve. So at the moment, we don't deviate that much from like the Unix-like concepts. Rather, Serenity is really just kind of a modern Unix, similar in many ways to OpenBSD. There are some things though that I think we can probably improve upon. For example, an area where we do struggle is fork performance, and we do a lot of work in fork that is wasted because we're just going to exec anyway, right? It's a classic Unix problem, and there are a bunch of different hack solutions like vfork, for example, but we have adopted in our user land, we've already adopted the POSIX spawn model, but right now it's just a wrapper around fork and exec. But I do think that with kernel side support for POSIX spawn, for example, we would be able to avoid a lot of the performance hit that we currently take from fork. Although I guess that's not really deviating from Unix. It's more like deviating from other Unix implementations, because I'm not aware that anybody actually implements POSIX spawn in the kernel. But I think we can, and it would be nice to not have to pay the price of fork every time that you want to exec a new process. Let's see, Mehdi says, has the 64-bit version of the system caught up with the 32-bit version? Mostly. There are some pieces missing. The user space emulator is not yet ported to 64-bit. We don't have 64-bit disassembly, and we don't have multiprocessor support in 64-bit yet. But it's like a shrinking list of things. But the 64-bit version is very usable at this point. Not crashy or unstable at all. It's just missing some functionality. Let's see. Volkan says, not sure if this has been asked before, but what are your thoughts on Rust as a professional C++ developer? This has been asked a fajillion times, and I don't really have an opinion about Rust because I have not written 100,000 lines of it, and as such, any opinion I might have is not worth hearing. Alex says he's been programming for 10 years with a few years of experience in C++. When he tried joining open source projects in the past, I've been hit on the head for being stupid, more or less. Okay, well, it's definitely the case that when you join open source projects, you have to adapt to whatever the house rules are in the project, right? You can't really go into a project thinking that you're going to do things your way. So what I always recommend to people is to join a project and lurk around for a bit, look at, follow the commits that go into the project, see what they look like, see how they're scoped, and see how people divide the work, things like that. And also like join the whatever, communication hub that they have, talk to people, or really just listen to people, see how they communicate with each other. Because a lot of the time when somebody comes to Serenity, it's very easy to tell if they have spent some time lurking before shooting code to us. And if you came to Serenity and didn't pay any attention to how things are done and you just tried to send us code, I would probably also tap you gently on the head and say, please read this document. But of course, I don't know the actual history of what happened here, but the recommendation still stands, right? Like you need to lurk and feel out the room so that you figure out how to interact. Let's see. Andrew January says, if you haven't already, could you go over how models work? For example, used by icon view. Right. So that's a pretty big topic, and I only have like 12 more minutes here. But the basic idea is that it's a 2D table data structure, or a hierarchical data structure in the case of trees. But the important thing is that it's actually based on the Qt model view architecture. So if you want to, you can read the Qt document about model view programming, and you will find that all the same concepts exist in our implementation. We just have our own version of it, basically. So you can learn about how our models work by reading about how the Qt ones work, because very, very similar. Let's see. Lennon says, do you think you would ever consider creating a programming language that fixes such issues you have with C++? Well, I'm not against the idea, but it's also not something that I feel would make me more productive at the moment. So that's more like something if it comes up in the future, and it becomes like if it becomes necessary to take matters in my own hands, I will. Let's put it that way. But at the moment, I'm productive and satisfied with C++. But things may change, and we'll have to see. So Mustafa says, it seems that you're a big fan of OpenBSD. Is there a reason you use Linux instead for development? Just convenience? Yes, just convenience. I am completely pragmatic person. I do not care about ideology. So it's all about convenience. Matthew says, when would you use smart pointers versus raw pointers and references? So I think I have a post on my blog about this. So I would recommend reading Serenity C++ patterns, references instead of pointers. This one right here explains my thoughts about it, and it links to an old blog post actually I wrote when I worked on WebKit. Look at that, 2013. I was a young boy. Let's see. ARM32 asks, how are GUI widgets laid out? So every GUI widget has a, or can have a layout attached to it. So GUI widget has a layout property, and we currently have two main layouts, vertical box layout and horizontal box layout. And then if you attach a layout to a widget, then it will automatically control any children that you add to that widget. And it will sort of divide out the space evenly between the widgets. And then if any widget has a fixed size, for example, it will only use that size. And then the remaining size is distributed among the remaining siblings. It is a little bit intricate how it works. If you want to know the details of it, you can read the box layout class, which is in box layout CBP in the libgui library. And here is the algorithm for distributing the space across either the vertical or horizontal axis. Let's see. M. Costa says, out of my experience in terms of for-profit game dev, tooling is more important than operating system features. If we can experiment and iterate faster, then the platform gets more attractive. Okay, so that makes sense. I do like to think that Serenity has quite nice profiling tooling. That's probably, in terms of like developer tooling, that's probably one of our strongest points. And we could certainly build more tools in that area for like profiling graphics pipelines and stuff like that, if we actually had a graphics pipeline. But yeah, I mean that's really good feedback. Like the fact that tooling is more important than OS features, that makes perfect sense. So Richard says, did you use Delphi or just Visual Basic? I used Visual Basic as a kid. I have not spent much time with Delphi, mostly because I never had access to it as a kid. I just used whatever my parents could get a hold of. Eliter says, what is paging for in x86? Paging is the translation of virtual addresses into physical addresses. So your computer has a certain amount of physical memory, right? Like RAM that you put into the slots of your motherboard. But the addresses that you use in your programs don't really have anything to do with the actual physical addresses of that RAM, of your RAM sticks. And paging is the mechanism by which the CPU translates from the virtual addresses used by your programs into the physical addresses used by the memory bus in your machine. And if you want to learn more about paging, I'm guessing that you can just type paging x86 and find lots and lots of articles. So I recommend that. Le Futuriste asks, are you running SerenityOS right now? I'm not running SerenityOS right now. I have it here if I want to run it. It boots pretty fast, but when I am here streaming and stuff and making videos, I'm using Ubuntu Mate. Eduardo says, hello, Andreas. Can you explain your case against exceptions and what are your preferred method to handle errors? My case? I don't know. I just don't use them. I prefer to return errors if there are errors. And if I don't have an error, then I don't return one. I worked on none of the serious C++ projects I've worked on have used exceptions. And they all did really well with like returning errors instead. So I don't know. I don't know what you're looking for exactly. Like I just prefer to return the error if I have an error. Let's see. Alex says one tool that would be amazing and would set your system apart would be native support for C++ hot code reloading, as in reloading C++ without manual recompilation and updating the running app. Oh, okay. That's an interesting prospect. You could, I mean, you could definitely do, if you're careful, you could definitely do like dynamic library hot reloading. If you want to like hot reload a running executable while it's running, that will certainly require some amount of orchestration and metadata, but it's not impossible. I mean, you could make changes to the program that would make it impossible to hot replace it, right? But that sounds more like compiler infrastructure problem than an operating system problem. Because if you can get compilers to give us enough information about this, then we could take that information and perform the hot reload. But I don't intuitively feel like we have that information at the moment. At the same time, though, like I've seen Andrew Kelly working on some features like that in Zig, so maybe there's something there. I don't know. I would have to look more into this actually. Let's see. Valtteri says, here is an exercise. Currently, in which ways is your host Linux system better than Serenity? And in which ways is Serenity better than your host system? So my host system has much better multi-core performance. That is probably the biggest deal breaker. I have a number of cores in my machine, right? I don't even know what to grep for actually. Family, let's say. So 16 of them, theoretically speaking. And when I compile, I can compile across these 16 cores. And in Serenity, I can only compile across one core reliably at the moment, maybe 4 if I'm lucky. But I think that's probably the main way that Linux is much better than Serenity. And in countless other ways too, right? Like it's able to play back YouTube videos and record audio and things like that. Like there's all kinds of feature that I need that I don't have in Serenity. And if we talk about ways that Serenity is better than my host system, I would say that performance profiling is so much easier in Serenity. If you have something that's running slow, it's so much easier to figure out why and do something about it if you can get it into Serenity. And I think that's probably something that I feel really driven to make that better and better and better, because I've always found it historically difficult to on most platforms, like, figure out why is this thing slow. So I have particular personal interest in making that really good. And also, I think that there's no way to get Linux to look as good as Serenity already does. I know that people like to use these like Windows 95 skins and things like that, but all of those have I don't know, they have like flaws that make them unacceptable to me. Like they're just they're all like in the uncanny valley, and I don't want to be in the uncanny valley. So I think that Serenity is like so much better looking than I can make Linux look. But it's a very interesting exercise, though, and I feel like I can probably go on forever if I follow that thread. So, Jassadine says, "Are you lucky?" I don't know if I'm lucky. I mean, in some ways, yes. In some ways, no. I think ultimately luck is irrelevant, and what matters is how we play the cards that we get. Um, trying to like either blame or praise luck for what happens is I don't know, it goes against the idea of personal responsibility, of which I am a big fan. So Ali says Dwarf should have enough-ish metadata to do hot function reloading, but compiler side support is definitely useful unless you accept the risk of needing to swap out all function pointers live. Right. Yeah. So that is tricky, right? Yeah. So Samuel says, do you think modern software and hardware is a net negative for humans? Would you make a case for simpler human-scaled software like Serenity? Thank you for the super chat, by the way. I really appreciate it. Modern software and hardware is a net negative for humans. I think in some ways, yes. And I think the incentives that are baked into a lot of software are very human hostile. Like the way that social applications are sort of incentivized to get you to engage and look at advertisements and things like that. Like, I think that there's absolutely nothing good about that for us. That's somebody else is enjoying the benefits of that, but not us, the users. But when it comes to hardware, I guess I do think that hardware, to a large extent, is positive for people. Like the fact that it's cheap and easy to get access to high-powered devices, computing devices today is fantastic. The fact that they're maybe less hackable than they were in the past, that's unfortunate. But I am optimistic that people will always find ways to do that anyway. But to your question about like simpler human-scaled software, I absolutely think that that there's a space for that, and I think more and more people are getting disillusioned with what's happening with software in particular. I think I have more issues with modern software than hardware, and maybe one of my big issues that I see is the extreme push for subscription models. I think the fact that you can't really go and like buy Microsoft Office or Adobe Photoshop and things like this anymore, but you have to subscribe to them, that's really weird, and it's clearly not again, it's clearly not for our benefit, it's somebody else benefiting. And it feels like they're going to keep changing these things in ways that make it less and less good for us. And maybe everybody has a breaking point where they say like, oh, this isn't good for me anymore. And I think that's where the market for simpler human scale software exists. But at the same time, like, I'm not interested in making money with this. I'm really just interested in making something nice for myself and for the people who participate to make something nice for themselves. And as Paul says here, like, simpler human scale software includes the ability to change the source. I think to a degree, yeah, like that's a part of it. It's certainly more human friendly if you can change the source, but it's not a necessity. Let's see, Kyle says, what tools are there for getting stack dumps of all kernel threads in Serenity? When working on some changes, I've managed to hit some deadlocks occasionally, and I'm not sure how to debug it right now. You can attach GDB to the kernel. That's the easiest way to do that. So if you have it running, then GDB is now on automatically. There's a GDB server on port 1234, I think, and I have my GDB set up to just connect to it. So, and every CPU is represented as a thread here. If you want all the individual kernel threads, then obviously like GDB is not good enough, but we do have a mechanism where you can press Alt-Shift-F12, and it will dump out all of the threads in the system and what they're doing. And there is some way to get it to print out the backtrace for each one as well. And I should remember what it is, but I don't, but we can go and look it up. Dump scheduler state. Control Alt Shift F12. Yeah, that's what you got to press. And I'm not going to press that here because I think that will screw up my X11, which happened on stream once and it was very difficult to get back. But yeah, so Control Alt Shift F12, I think you can press to get backtraces for everything. That should definitely help figuring out what's going on. XMS says, can Serenity run without GUI? Yes, it is possible to run in text-only mode. The system is in text-only mode here, as you can see. You can also jump back to the GUI. And I don't particularly care about text-only mode, so I only run in the GUI. And running out of time here, so let's take the remaining questions and then wind it down. So Richard says, why did you choose to write the whole operating system instead of Linux distro? Because I'm not interested in building a patchwork of random packages like yet another Linux distro. I want to build something cohesive and consistent. I don't think that the world needs another Linux distro. Like that is not an interesting area to explore to me. The existing distributions do a good job, and I have nothing to add there. But by building everything ourselves, it gives us access to vertical integrations that are simply not going to happen in Linux, right? Or they take years to do because you have to get different teams to coordinate, maybe across different programming languages and everything. And in Serenity, it's trivial to coordinate between like GUI applications and kernel, for example. And Alex says, I find your game port videos extremely interesting and I can't get enough. Do you have any other game ports planned? I don't have any plans. And then he has some suggestions like OpenTTD, Cube2, and SuperTux. I think there's an OpenTTD port already, isn't there? There's an OpenTTD port. And I usually port stuff that I care about personally, so I have no personal connection to these things, so I probably won't port them. But there are some games that I would like to see ported, so maybe I'll do one. It's certainly pretty fun to do that. So Matthew says, when I asked about pointers before, I meant when would you use non-smart pointers versus smart pointers? A lot of other answers just pooed on raw pointers, but you seem to use them a bit in Serenity. Right, so we use raw pointers if we don't need to encapsulate ownership in any way. So if you are just referring to an object, but the reference that you're referring to it through doesn't need to own the object in any way, then using a raw pointer is often fine. But whenever there's any kind of ownership, so if you want something to be guaranteed to stay alive, for example, then we usually use either a reference counting smart pointer or a single owner pointer. Or if you want to learn when an object is destroyed, you can use a weak pointer. But I don't know, like there isn't like a hard and fast rule about how we use smart versus raw pointers. I guess it's almost like a little bit about taste. But if you want to hold on to a raw pointer, the longer you hold on to a raw pointer, the riskier it gets, right? So you need to have a very well understood lifetime model of the pointee object if you're using a raw pointer. And for that reason, I tend to use them like short term mostly, or when the lifetime is like very well defined. But I don't have anything against them. I just think that they are tools, and the language has many tools. Mark Kopenga asks, what do you think about the Ars Technica article about Serenity? I thought it was a very nice article. And I really, really appreciated that the journalist actually spent time with the system. Like, you could tell that he had compiled it and messed around and fallen in love with it, just like all the rest of us. And I really like that, because you sometimes, like, we've been in the there have been articles written about the system in the past, but very often they're kind of low effort articles where people just take like one of the screenshots that we have on GitHub and they write down the something that's clearly based on the README. And I really, really liked that here was somebody who took the time to try it out and mess around. And it was, I don't know, it was heartwarming. I really enjoyed it. Let's see. Trapex, it says, the many normies like subscription in the sense it is software as a service. Better user experience for them. Yeah, definitely. It has benefits, but I do think that, or I would like to think that you can only charge people so many times before they start to get frustrated. A bit like how streaming services kind of made internet piracy go away for a long time, but now they've fragmented and there's like 50 different streaming services, so piracy is coming back. I feel like if enough software products move to subscription services, then people are going to have that same the same thing is going to happen there, basically. Let's see. Slendy asks, is there any way to start Serenity in tiling window management mode? I have the Windows key as my mod key, and when I try to move or resize Windows, I move QEMU instead. I don't know how to do that. There's probably some way to configure Serenity to work better, or rather what you want to do is configure QEMU to work better with your window manager, right? And I don't know exactly how to do that. Valtteri says, that sure is a cool T-Mug. If only I knew where to get one. Ah, yes. This T-Mug right here is the Hello Friends T-Mug from the stores.serenityos.org. Or store, rather. We don't have stores, but we do have a store. So if anybody likes that mug, you can get your very own. Thank you for Thank you for giving me a reason to plug the store. Let's see. Armo says, what technical article? Okay, yeah, right. So it was on Ars Technica. They wrote about Serenity the other day, and we were featured on the front page 2 days in a row, which brought a lot of visitors. Here's the article if you want to read it. And now I am definitely out of time, so I'm just going to wind down and say thank you, everybody, for coming to this week's office hours. I really appreciate the company and all the super chats, all the great questions. And I hope that everybody has a great weekend. I'm going to plug LangJam one more time. So if you're interested, my friend JT is hosting a computer programming language jam this weekend where you will build a language over the weekend, and it sounds like it might be fun. It's like a game coding jam, but for programming languages. So check it out on github.com/langjam. And if you participate, then good luck with your language. I think they're going to start in the next couple of hours. So go check it out. And see you all next time. Bye.